very familiar with because the last time we saw him was in the Scottsdale, Arizona meeting for 2019 meeting. And I personally feel very sad that we are not seeing him here and we will not see him again in ICC. Charles Darnell will be delivering the eulogy.
Arturo Jose Maldonado Guzman, or Art as we knew him, was an AA. Now, don't let your minds wander. In South Louisiana, AA stands for Andui Aficionado. And since Art lived for a while in Destrehan, Louisiana, we approve him and accept him as a remote Cajun. When I first met Art, he found out that I lived slightly north of where he was fond of buying his favorite andouille. That was a little town, and his shop, like little town of, well, he lived in Destrehan, and the shop was Buddy Bailey's world famous andouille. And so he knew that I drove south and turned right past Buddy Bailey's, and he would ask me to regularly pick up andouille, hogshead cheese, and various other South Louisiana specialties, and either deliver it to him if we were there at a meeting together, or ship it to him, at his home. I remember him fondly. We were friends, and he shared with me his mother's Puerto Rican jambalaya recipe, and by the way, in South Louisiana, it's pronounced jambalaya, not jambalaya. I posted that on my company website. I invite all of you to download it. I cooked it last week again in memory of my friend, and it's a little different from how we make it in South Louisiana, but it does have andouille, and it has a special type of sofrito, or Holy Trinity as we call it in Louisiana. So it's got the garlic, the onion, and the bell pepper, but it also has the culantro, which is a type of cilantro that's much more fragrant, very difficult to find in Louisiana. I had to ship it in from South Florida. I first met Art in 2013. I apologize for the typo in the written eulogy. I wasn't expecting it to get written into the newsletter, so fortunately, I guess a lot of you have read it, so thank you for the kind words you shared with me. I believe it was in Pittsburgh at the ICC meeting, and there I was about to start my own venture, and this dapper man, great tan, good looking, very gregarious, and very passionate about cables. Was just full of energy and expertise, and I knew I wanted to get him alone for just a few minutes to try and ask him a few questions and see if he would help me with some of the knowledge that he had gleaned over the years. And how was I going to get this stalwart in the industry to give me 5 minutes after the meeting? I thought, well, I'll ask him to join me for a glass of wine after the meeting. And so I asked him, and he accepted. We walked down to the restaurant. Well, what sort of wine do you want, Art? Whatever, Charles, it doesn't matter. And so I ordered a bottle, and we sat down, and I asked him about himself. And the first words out of his mouth were, does anyone know what to say it? I'm a polymer chemist. And there are a few chuckles around the room, and those of you who didn't know him well won't understand. But I'll promise you, hopefully many, many, many years down the line, one of your friends will be eulogizing you up here, and they're going to talk about you. And some of your idiosyncrasies and habits will be broadcast to the whole public, and we'll just leave it at that. He also told me that he majored in chemical engineering, graduated from the University of Puerto Rico. He received his MBA from the University of Delaware. I believe he was working for DuPont in Puerto Rico, and he moved with the company to Delaware. He was, of course, an officer in ICC in the officer rotation. He served as past chair of ICC Subcommittee D, Generating Station and Industrial Cable. And as we sat there after the meeting, he taught me a lot about polymer chemistry, about thermoplastics and thermosets, some of which I probably should have learned in my university chemistry class, but I didn't. And it helped me quite a lot. And I've got to tell you, that offer of Chardonnay was the perfect offer of friendship, because it turns out Art, like I, am passionate about food and wine. His particular passion was for a small town in Burgundy, and I just happened to strike it. I couldn't have done this any better, but I selected a bottle of Pommes Montrachet that afternoon. And as we sat there talking, he told me about his experiences. His previous life we talked about at DuPont. He later worked for Uniroyal Chemical, where he worked on the first medium voltage EPR. He was the VP of Technology and Market Development at Cable USA. He held a US patent for thermoplastic elastomer blends with improved oil resistance. And his last job, of course, was at AM Technology Group, where he was the chief chemist. And this was his entrepreneurial venture. For those of you who knew him, he was always smiling. He was always at work very early. He loved his job. He loved to network with people. And he loved thermoplastics and thermosets. Over the years, Art regularly attended ICC. He also attended virtually every electrical standards meeting that dealt with cable construction, cable testing, and installation. And so he and I sat on a lot of common standards committees. Among the committees that most of you will be familiar with are IEEE 1242, 1717, 1810, and he was also very active in IEC, where he represented the U.S. on TC20 Working Group 18, and I believe he led the effort, a harmonization effort between the IEEE and IEC for testing circuit integrity cables. Art was always ready to volunteer his time on standards, working groups, etc., and always ready to share his knowledge with anyone who wanted to know, who had a question or needed to learn a little bit more. And after all, that's part of what we're doing here, as Hank explained to us earlier, is the networking and the teaching of other people. He was really a leader in that. The last time I spoke to Art was in September 2020. Art was driving to the airport to help friends and family in Puerto Rico who had suffered devastating effects of Hurricane Maria, I believe it was, and an earthquake. So he was traveling over to rebuild. And when I called him, despite the terrible circumstances of his homeland, he took the occasion to invite my wife and I to visit him in Naples, Florida. We settled on a date, and I made my reservations. He had purchased a special bottle of wine for me, and my persuasion is not really Chardonnay, but I was looking forward to the visit, to sharing some wine with him, and to do some off-site networking. Well, sadly, COVID intervened, and that trip never happened. It's with profound sadness that I share with you today Art's passing in July of last year. Art survived by his two daughters, Iredna and Marissa, and Marissa's daughter, his granddaughter, Jasmine. And we had a picture of Jasmine, and if anybody would like to see he and Jasmine together, just let me know, and I'll send you that photo. I'm always going to remember his warm friendship, his generosity, his passion for Chardonnay and Cajun food. And tonight when we're at dinner, separately, whatever it is that you're drinking, whatever your beverage is, lift a glass in remembrance of Art, our good friend and former colleague.
Thank you, Charles. That is an amazing story about Art, and although I would not have heard these stories about him, but I can picture that is just Art. I'm sure we will all have fond memory of art for many years to come. Thank you. Please rise for a moment of silence.